Audio unleashed. I got a question for you, buddy.
Yeah, what's that?
How the heck are we going to top last episode?
We will have to rise to new levels of erudition and
nice.
And humor, perhaps.
Yeah. Well, okay. Got a lot of good comments on the last episode. On
good.
YouTube, we've got Leckman saying, one of, if not the best episode ever. Guard6364 says, very compelling interview. Thank you.
Wow.
Mark Galliano says, such a brilliant, articulate man. Amazing interview. Love this podcast. Just a lot of great comments like that. We got a lot on Patreon too. Jim F. This is a great episode. I enjoyed the interview discussion. Joe Mariano, a friend who was on a couple of weeks ago, he couldn't help himself. He left 2 comments about how great it was. So,
nice.
Yeah. Dr. Toole, if you're listening to us, just know that you are well loved and well respected.
We'll counter that this episode by featuring the Anti-Toole. But before that, what are we going to do?
We're going to talk about a video from the Cheap Audio Man called The Truth About Tube Amps Nobody's Talking About. So this is one of those where Randy's kind of like, tube amps suck. Except for this one. He's got a lot of thoughts about why he's not a fan of tube amps. Except for this one. Of course, this one being the one he's reviewing. But I think we got a lot to sort of latch on and talk about here. A lot of generalizations that, some of it's valuable, some of it's a little questionable, but we're gonna dig deep into it and give our thoughts.
Yeah. And I have a lot of experience with tubes. I go back to the days when tubes were kind of the norm.
Yeah.
When I learned about that as a kid and have had a lot of experience with tubes. So I have my own things to say about this.
I'll have to tell you my story about being a kid and experiences with tubes, but we'll save that for the segment.
Okay.
So what do you want to talk about?
I want to talk about the Anti-Toole. Ted Denny of Synergistic Research. Although this is actually a piece that comes from the Music Room, which I guess is one of his dealers.
Yeah.
And it's titled Synergistic Research, Cables, Power, and the Philosophy of Intention-Driven Audio.
Man, why is it just never, ever a good thing when philosophy and audio mix?
It's not, but I will say, to be fair to the Music Room and Ted Denny, the headline doesn't say what the intention is.
That's a really good point.
So... I have my own ideas. I'm sure you do too about what their intentions might be.
Well, I have my opinions about it. So
yeah, I have my opinions too. This is all going to be our opinion. But anyway, we're gonna discuss what intention-driven audio is and some of the claims that are made here. And they have a cute little video where they do a what, in my opinion, is a quasi-scientific test. And it's all okay. I mean, Ted Denny's going to die happy and rich.
Yeah, there you go.
So he shouldn't be complaining too much.
Yeah.
Anyway, and then we're going to segue gracefully into what?
A LinkedIn post that you sent me from Steve, I believe his last name would be pronounced Temme.
Temme.
President of Temme? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
As far as I know, I've always heard it pronounced that way. I've met him before somewhere briefly. I can't remember where.
But anyway, so this post is called Why Headphone Target Curves and THD Don't Tell the Whole Story. For any of you normies in the audience, THD is total harmonic distortion. So he just sort of goes through and talks about specifications, talks about target curves, and talks about issues related to whether or not those things tell the whole story with regard to performance. Needless to say, I think you're going to have a lot more to say about this one than I am. I'm going to be nodding my head and going,
I have a lot. Makes sense.
Yeah,
a lot.
Yeah, but we'll get there. This is, for a LinkedIn post, man, this is pretty good. It's like a whole article, but
yeah.
Anyway, we'll get there. What are we going to do for patrons this week, though?
We're going to look at something that we didn't, as usual, look at something we didn't actually attend, but we're going to read things that other people said about the event we didn't attend, which is the
Audio Video Show 2025 is what it's called.
Okay. Anyway, it's a really good show. I was lucky enough to go once, and it's a very different kind of show. It's very well attended. It's a lot of fun. And so we're going to talk about some of the things they saw, and probably mostly talk about speakers that we found amusing and interesting from both Stereophile and from Soundstage. Both.
Yeah.
They both covered it pretty well.
You know, before we get to that, let's talk about tube amps, man. Let's talk about the truth about tube amps nobody's talking about. Nobody in the history of the universe has said any of these things about tube amps. I'm kidding, of course. That's
actually, there's a lot of things he says about tube amps that I have not heard people say.
Well, that's a good point. Like I don't think I've ever heard anybody describe tube amps as so dangerous that they shouldn't be legal. That was a new one by me.
Yeah, that's kind of new. There's a lot of tubes out there, and I gotta say, look, I've had tubes in everything from table radios to amplifiers that my dad gave me to my first guitar amps.
Have I ever told you my story about learning what the heck solid state meant when I was 5 years old?
No.
We got a new TV when I was 5 years old. It was a massive, massive console television. I believe it was a 23-inch Zenith TV. And the delivery man, had brought it into the den and was setting it up and everything like that. And this was the time when then you went to the kitchen to fill out the paperwork and write the check for the delivery and everything like that. So while my mom and dad were in the kitchen talking to the delivery man, I had gone back behind the television, our new television.
Oh boy!
To take off the back panel so I could see, what's different about this one. And me, 5 years old, all of a sudden I look over the top of this TV and I'm like, Daddy, they're trying to rip us off. This TV doesn't have any tubes in it.
Oh, that's funny.
Because I was the one, even at 5, I was the one who fixed the electronics. I was the one who replaced the tubes when they needed replacing, and that, and in our stereo, had a console stereo system in the other room as well. So anyway, that's when I learned that not everything ran on tubes anymore.
Wow.
Yeah.
So anyway, so what the points Randy makes are, he basically contends that tube amps are dangerous because, tubes of course can break. I've never had one break on me, and I've had lots of tube gear. And that includes lugging my Fender Twin, which weighed a ton, in and out of cars and all that kind of stuff. And one of the really big points he makes is like how impractical and in his words, dangerous tubes are. But also at the end of the video, he talks about this Prima Luna integrated tube amp and how much he likes it.
Yeah.
And you want to talk about that first? Let's talk about that first. Because the way he describes the sound of the tubes is very much like the way that, Bob Carver, who, was a mentor to me, Bob used to, and Bob was a very no-nonsense guy, and Bob loved tubes, especially EL84s, which also kind of my favorite tube because my first integrated amp had EL84s, and or 6BQ5, depending on where you're coming from. And the way Bob described tube sound is the way I think he just said it had a certain body to it, and there was something that was hard to describe and actually even hard to measure, but it just had something to it. And that's the way that Randy talks about it too.
Yeah.
Where I would strongly disagree with him is that tubes are dangerous. I mean, yes, it's typical plate voltage on tubes is 400 volts or something, at least for, power tubes driving your speakers. Yeah. And that's why you have transformers after it on almost all tube amps to, bring the voltage down.
Mm-hmm.
Regular amplifiers, though, have high voltage rails as well.
Yeah.
I mean, if 400 volts is more dangerous than, 120, but they're both dangerous. And he's right that, you can break a tube accidentally, except I just never have. And I don't know anybody who has. And he talks about your pets being electrocuted and stuff. It's like, my pets were never curious about my tube gear. I mean, they couldn't have cared less. They like, food mainly. And I guess if you put peanut butter on your tubes, it would maybe. But
but here's the thing, though, Brent. You and I are canine people, and felines are very, very different. Like everybody I know with cats, like their cats sit on anything warm. Their cats are sitting on their laptops. Their cats are sitting on their turntables. So a little bit of a difference there.
But if the cat sits on the tube's going to be hot, and the cat's going to not sit on the tube very quickly. And
good point.
And I guess the cat could break the tube, but they probably won't. And cats aren't very heavy, or very strong for that matter. And I'm sure there's somebody out there who's going to say, "Well, I have a Maine Coon that blah blah blah." But anyway, so a lot of that I just really disagree with, and whether or not you have tubes is just a pretty ordinary decision, and it's like whether or not you want a motorcycle with a straight 4 or a V twin. It's like they'll both work. I mean, a straight 4 is going to be more efficient and probably more powerful, but a V twin works, and it's more old fashioned. It's cooler. I just kind of really disagree with the notion that tubes are impractical. And also, I got to say, I was just visiting my good friend Gordon Soak up in Canada, and he had a radio there. And I said, "What year is that radio?" He said, "Like 1961, and which is the same year as me." And it had automatic tuning to where you could push up and it would seek, but it would seek by having a little motor in there that turned the tuning knob until it got a strong enough signal, and then it would stop. And it actually worked. So you hit the button and it goes, right? And this thing was humongous. It was about 2 feet wide and I'd say maybe 14 inches high. It sounded really good. It was stereo. And I said, "What tubes are in there?" He's like, "I don't know." I said, "You never pulled it apart?" He's like, "No, a customer gave it to me." And he said, "It's just worked for years." And this thing is 63 years old. 64 maybe, actually probably 64. And I don't know if the original owner ever changed the tubes. Gord hasn't. Still works perfectly. I mean, granted, if you have a guitar amp that you're cranking all the time, you're probably going to go through tubes, certainly power tubes. But in a normal hi-fi system, your tubes can last many years. Yeah. And you don't have to replace them. And he also talks about distortion in here too, which we're going to get to a little bit later. But there's a lot of talk about how tubes are, the bass is kind of mushy because of the transformer, right? And the top end's kind of soft, also probably because of the transformer, which isn't necessarily the case. I actually had a tube preamp from a company called Bottlehead, and it was a $99 product called a Quickie. And it was like a kit that you made. And it had 2, I can't remember what the tubes were, little preamp tubes. And, it was a stereo preamp. And it ran off of 4 9-volt batteries. So 36 volt.
Wow.
And it had a couple of, I think there were D cells in there that ran the heaters. Okay. And that are inside the tubes. And I measured it, and it measured great. It measured like a solid state preamp.
Wow.
Pretty close. And I actually tried with my ABX box to tell the difference between that and the preamp and the Krell integrated I owned at the time. I couldn't tell them apart. It was really disappointing. I'm like, but it was very, very good. There's a lot of tube gear that doesn't sound that transparent, but it's quite possible for tubes to sound very transparent and very technically good without a lot of distortion. If you want distortion, you can get it. If a designer wants to add distortion, they can easily do that. Yeah. But, there's always talk about how tubes are, have more second order distortion, although that's really true of single-ended tube products and not so much the push-pull. There's so much hypothesis about why tubes do such and such and so. But, the fact that I really believe that the thing with tubes is the output transformer changes the sound.
Yeah, well, the output transformer and its relationship with the sort of impedance load of the speaker. Don't you think it'd be fair to say?
Yeah, and it's fair to say, as he kind of points out here, and as you can see in any of John Atkins's measurements of tube amps, the output impedance of the tube amp might be an ohm compared to a tiny fraction of an ohm with solid state. And when you're talking about an 8 ohm load or 4 ohm load or something, that's significant, and it will change the sound of your speaker. And that's just as true of headphones too. I remember I measured I can't remember the brand. It was like a brand from Croatia or somewhere. This beautiful tube amp that was a, single-ended output, for headphones. And oh my God, I can't remember what the output impedance was, but it was high. And it just radically changed the sound of your headphones.
Yeah.
And so tubes can do that. And, Bob Carver in his amps, he used to have what he called a current drive option, which was a switch that would basically throw a 1 ohm resistor into the circuit after the output transistors. And it would just add an ohm to the impedance, to the output impedance, and it would change the sound of the speakers. Right. And he said, it's basically pretty similar to what a tube amp does. So it's kind of simulating the sound of what you get with tubes. And it kind of did. And I had some of those Sunfire amps, and I never used that mode because it always seemed a little softer sounding to me.
Yeah.
But so it's sort of like if you have mic preamps and things like that on the pro side. A lot of the old Neve stuff has, transformer input, transformer output and stuff. And it sounds different. Is it better? I don't know. Maybe. Is it worse? Could be. But it's different. Yeah. And so that's really why I think tubes sound different, whether it's better or worse, whatever. And I just, it's just kind of groovier.
I just like the way they look, man. I mean,
I do too.
And I don't apologize for that a bit, because I think aesthetics matter in our audio systems. I think if something, look, why do you think we keep going back to my obsession with VU meters. I just like the way they look. I like watching a little needle dance. At some point in my formative years, I had an experience with a sound system that had VU meters in it, and that imprinted some sort of Pavlovian thing on me, where now, dancing VU meters bring me more into the listening experience. Tubes are like that for somebody out there, and that there is nothing wrong with that. That is 100% valid. So even you're just like, I like the way they glow, man. I mean, personally, for me, the inefficiency kills them, and also I just man, with the way modern Class D amplifiers, especially the sort of load invariant ones, you just know what they're going to sound like when you plug them in, which is pretty much nothing. And I kind of like that. I just and but that's me saying I like that. I prefer that. It doesn't mean I'm right. It just means that's what I prefer. Now, whether or not that's what most people are going to prefer, I don't know. But I mean, lay our biases out, man.
I would rather, honest to God, given the choice of one or the other, I'd rather have a tube amp. I mean, I wouldn't get a single-ended one. I had what is that company? Gold Note? It was 300B tubes, single-ended. It was like 9 watts output. I actually measured it. It actually did make its power rating, even though its power rating was only like 9 watts. And I listened to it, and I tried it with a few different speakers. I had some Klipsch's that it worked pretty well with, and I can't remember what else, but I just really didn't like it. It just did not have any kind of kick. But a good 30 watt, like a Dynaco Stereo 70 or something like that, to name an old one, or like the Prima Luna that Randy's talking about here. Those are fine. That's what I would have. That's something that'll drive a good normal speaker. You don't have to have a super efficient speaker to work with that. And I would probably have an amp like this, but I think I've seen John Atkinson's measurements on some of the Prima Luna stuff, and it ain't spectacular. I might try to find something that measures a little bit better.
Yeah. It's beautiful, though. I love the look of the metal. I love
design.
Especially like the knobs have a very sort of Parasound look to them. They almost look like Parasound knobs, and I just love Parasound knobs. So
it's a beautiful product. It's very nicely designed. It's very it's only going to measure so good. Like I said,
Yeah.
other than like that little preamp I had, I think you can make a tube preamp that measures great. Power amp, it's a little tougher.
To each their own, buddy. So, but the fear mongering about how dangerous these things are and how dangerous it is to work. I mean, look, honestly, how many people are working on their amplifiers anyway? Not if you're going to work on your amp, you probably know how to work on your amp. I don't think a lot of people are out there just sort of cracking the case, digging into the electronics of their audio gear. So all of the warnings about how dangerous these things are is just, I don't know, way overboard, too sensational, man.
And he talks about setting the bias, and a lot of this stuff is auto bias nowadays. But I found some I found some of John Atkinson's measurements of the Prima Luna Prologue Premium Power Amplifier. And just as an example, this thing, when hooked up to a simulated speaker load, has a 3 dB peak, 3.5 dB peak at like 60, 70 hertz. Got another 3.5 dB peak at like 1.5K. It's got a big dip. It's got a 3 dB dip at 4.5K, and then the whole treble is tilted down. Oh boy. So it's like somebody just sitting there randomly with an EQ. There are tube amps that measure better than this and that have lower output impedance and don't have as many problems as this, but there are a lot that do have these problems. And this thing puts out, let's see, what's it putting out into? It's breaking 1% distortion at pretty low power levels, like 20 watts or something. So, oh well. But you know what? We should move on to something where whether or not it works is considerably more questionable.
Oh, that's a good way of putting it. All right, I got to go fill up my water, buddy. Okay. So let's take a break, and we'll come back and talk about synergistic research again. Welcome back. This is Audio Unleashed. Dang, talk about distortion. Wow.
I cut my hands around the mic. Was that good?
Yeah, it was great. I loved it. Anyway, this time around, we're talking about a piece that was published on the Music Room, which is a audio retail site, kind of like an audiophile version of things like, Crutchfield and Audio Advice and things like that. It's definitely a little more mystical than either of those two retailers.
Well,
but, yeah. So anyway, the piece is called Synergistic Research: Cables, Power, and the Philosophy of Intention-Driven Audio, which reminds me a lot of the Purpose-Driven Life. Do you remember that when that was the big deal?
Yeah, Rick Warren. I went to his church one time.
So this piece is by Michael Horn, and let's just call it what it is. This is one gigantic advertorial for Ted Denny's Synergistic Research. I mean, look, let's just start at the beginning, because I think this will set the tone for the entire piece. Ted Denny and his team at Synergistic Research are focused on the unsolvable. The noise, resonance, and interference that linger even after you've invested in world-class gear. They call it intention-driven audio. The idea that you don't just buy components, you take control of the entire system. Every detail, every weak link, every overlooked interaction in the room is an opportunity to bring you closer to the music. And you can imagine where it goes from there. Well, you don't have to imagine. We're going to provide a link. Everybody can read it for themselves. But
well, yeah, I mean, and then it goes on to say, synergistic isn't about chasing wattage, driver size, or the usual spec sheet battles. I would contend, Dennis, that statement is inarguable. They are not about any of those things.
That's a good point.
What they're doing is different, stripping away the hidden obstacles between your system and the performance and doing it in ways that are as radical as they are effective.
Yeah.
You know, who can argue with that? We're stripping away the hidden obstacles between your system and the performance, aren't we? But we're identifying a different set of obstacles.
That's true. Psychological obstacles, maybe it would be fair to say.
We might identify synergistic research as, in our opinion, one of the hidden obstacles.
That's a really good point, man. So
this was funny, though. Mm-hmm. Go ahead. Keep talking. I'm enjoying this.
I was just going to say that the thing that really trips me out is that you just go right into the whole vision quest that Ted Denny went on. Basically, is sort of like, I don't know, he set out to walk the earth like Kane from Kung Fu and ended up, meditating and, discovering the secrets to good audio in Buddhist monasteries. And it's just like, this explains so much. It's just, I don't know. This is it explains the appeal, I think, in my opinion, of synergistic research's gear for people who truly believe that you can't know anything. You can't measure anything meaningful. You just have to listen and trust your ears, man. Except you can't do blind testing because that's not trusting your ears. If you can't see what's being tested, then you're not trusting. I don't know. It falls apart at that point for me, but
it's a classic hero's journey thing. You have to. I mean, I've actually known Ted since he started out, and he was making like kind of good, affordable cables, and that was it was something I could talk about. That's fine, but he really, I think, changed a lot, and maybe it was a result of this hero's journey, where he did a solo voyage he set sail on a solo voyage around the world. I don't know what that means. I don't know if that means you hop in a sailboat like, Thor Heyerdahl or somebody. But, he was like the Kon-Tiki dude, I think. Or if it's like, set sail on a solo voyage around the world, meaning just like buying a lot of plane tickets or something. And but anyway,
either way, I think we can agree this was not a 3-hour tour.
No, and it also was I think not a tour of, say, research facilities in Japan and China and and England and Germany and stuff like that. I'm going to guess no audio research facilities were involved.
Yeah,
but did you watch the video?
Yeah, I did. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
I don't know how I forgot about that. I'd read this over like last week, or think, when Doug Schneider from Soundstage sent me a link to it. Just
nice.
Yeah.
Thanks, Doug.
Me and, yeah. And submitted it without comment at that, because I don't think much needed to be commented on about it. But yeah.
Except Soundstage reviews synergistic research products, I must say. It's funny, though, because this video, they're comparing the pink power cable to the Shunyata Theta, which is $1,000 roughly, and the pink power cable is $200. He lit a fuse on the debate stage of audio. So that's a strongly mixed metaphor, but that's a bold mixing of metaphors. But it's like this dealer guy, I guess this guy from the music room. They sit there and they have Ted's reference system, which is, to his credit, Magical speakers, nice, and a bunch of other stuff that looks fine. But I don't see any acoustic treatment in the room other than Ted's own acoustic treatment, which, shall we just say, presents an alternative viewpoint to the laws of physics.
Oh, there you go. Yeah,
And
I like it.
and they also, so that like they record the sound of the system with the two different power cables using, microphones in the room, which I'm kind of like, and then they put it on YouTube. What's the compression they use on there? It's MP4.
It depends on
so
what resolution the video is. It
Okay,
really,
so-
it's crazily variable. Yeah.
Okay, so it could be AAC, it could be, I think, MP3. I can't remember.
Yeah, it could be up to like 320 kilobits AAC. It could be all the way.
Yeah.
It could be all the way down to like 64 kilobits. Again, depending on the resolution you select,
But
the
still,
video resolution.
very questionable signal chain here. I mean, I would tap straight out of the amplifiers, because you can run them at low level, pull a line output, A to D it. That'd be more legit. But, I listen to it. I'm kind of like, oh, God, I guess if I put it on a big system, I might hear some kind of a difference. But the whole thing, I really have a strong contention. And if I leave anything, if my career, results in leaving anything other than the coining of the term eardrum suck, I would like it to be the notion that, in my opinion, people who think this stuff matters don't know anything about music.
Yeah.
Okay, because musicians don't talk about this stuff. They don't talk about inner detail. Granted, there are a couple musicians who buy into this stuff, but almost none of them do, and none of the ones I've ever dealt with do. And, musicians just don't think this way. They don't worry about inner detail. Just the way you play your instrument, little changes in the way you play your instrument make a much bigger difference than any of this kind of stuff. And this is just readily demonstrable, okay? It's just like, people talk all the time. Guitarists talk all the time about, famous guitarists talk about how they played Eddie Van Halen's rig and they sounded like themselves. And then Eddie Van Halen played their rig and he sounded like Eddie Van Halen. Okay?
Yeah.
And I've mentioned in articles that, Carlos Santana sounds like Carlos Santana no matter which of the many guitars and amps he's endorsed he happens to be playing at that time. I really think that people who think these little tiny, I'm not saying his products don't make a difference. I mean, it is technically possible for these products to make some very tiny difference, but it's not important. This is not what is important in music.
Yeah. Yeah.
Music is melody, rhythm, and harmony, man. It's just not inner detail.
Yeah. Can I say something nice about this pink power cable, though?
Sure.
I like the fact that it is not a fire hose. So many of these audiophile power cables, I fear, do more harm than good because they're so massive, they're so weighty, they're putting strain on the power connector. They're inflexible. How the heck do you route them anywhere? And also, some of them have, filtering stuff. That, look, I'm not going to claim I've looked into enough to understand, but I'm looking at it going, I would like to dig deeper and see if that might be limiting current, actually, whereas it doesn't look like this pink power cable has any of that crap. It's just a nice, thin, flexible jacket, good conductor, good connectors. Is it worth $200? Almost certainly not. Would you be much smarter spending $200 on that than, this $1,000 Shunyata thing? Even if, just forget any questions of performance or anything like that. Just on paper, looking at it, going, I mean, it's if your goal is to provide power to your component, the $198 thing is at least as good as, if not better than, the $998 thing. So,
well, yeah. It's actually kind of a nice design. It's got these kind of unusual looking molded ends. And, look, I understand that if you have really fancy stereo gear, you probably don't want to hook up generic cables, right? Just like you don't want to, if you're a sommelier or whatever, or a serious wine collector, you probably don't want to drink out of, generic glasses that you buy at Total Wine and More. You probably want some super ultra fancy Rob Report kind of glass. Hey, whatever, fine. I'm totally cool with that. If you want fancy power cables, hey, $200 is not a bad price compared to a lot of them.
Yeah.
I kind of understand that urge. Although, I got this big, nasty Krell branded power cable for, oh God, I think it was 30 or $40 on eBay. I was shocked at how cheap it was. And it was new. It was not used. And it's really heavy duty looking. So, a lot of people like to have these big, like you say, garden hose looking cables. And, so I'm not saying go to Home Depot and buy the cheap RCA plastic interconnects there and whatever, power cord. If you want to go buy fancy ones, go do it,
Yeah.
You're into kind of higher end stuff. You want to, you want to complete the whole high end package. I totally get it. But I just think that this has nothing to do with music at all. I mean, just nothing whatsoever. And
well, one of the commenters might disagree with you. Roy Braun 19 commented this. I strongly prefer the Theta. The instruments were clearer with better tonality and deeper bass. The pink covered everything with a silver sheen. Your mileage may vary. What?
Yeah.
What is a silver sheen, man? Just, huh?
I don't know. It's a good question. But that's the thing. That's why I've become so impatient with this stuff and why I kind of don't want to go to high-end audio shows now, because these are not people who understand music, in my opinion. I mean, it's the whole Harry Pearson thing. And that's actually how I met Harry Pearson, is Ted Denny. I saw at a show and he said, "You going to Harry's party?" I'm like, "Harry who?" He says, "Harry Pearson. He's having a party." I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" He's like, "Yeah, come on, let's go." And we went and he introduced me to Harry Pearson, who was a delightful man. He was really pleasant. But it's the whole Harry Pearson thing of like, you can spend all this money and that makes you a refined man of culture instead of actually having to learn something about music.
Yeah.
Which you can do for the price of a few good books, and the price of a few concert tickets.
Yeah, speaking of the whole, man of culture thing, the whole 6 pillars of synergy aspect just really irritated me, because it's obvious to me that he is, in my opinion, maybe I shouldn't say it's obvious then. In my opinion, what it seems like he's trying to do is sort of hook people in who've vaguely heard something about pillars of something, right? I'm thinking of like T. Lawrence's book, The 7 Pillars of Wisdom, which was the basis for Lawrence of Arabia, right? The 7 Pillars of Wisdom. And I think that originally comes from the book of Proverbs or something like that. But, he changes it and it's the 6 pillars of synergy. And I think maybe a lot of times people do things like this is because if he said the 7 pillars of synergy, I don't know, maybe he couldn't come up with a 7th pillar. But in this case, I think it's just because if you Googled the 7 pillars of synergy, then what would come up would be the 7 pillars of wisdom. And you'd be like, oh, he's just ripping that off for rhetorical effect, right? It seems to me that so much of the energy that goes into this brand is stuff like that, coming up with the hooks, coming up with the rhetorical tricks and the marketing stuff. Not that it really means anything. I mean, the 6 pillars of synergy here are power, grounding, cabling, mechanical tuning, acoustics, electromagnetic field control. And he goes through the points of each and like why synergistic research's stuff makes a difference.
But countless other high-end brands do that too.
Well, I know.
And I gotta say, maybe we're stupid. Maybe if we had the 5 pillars of audio unleashed, we'd be driving Ferraris too.
I don't want a Ferrari, man. I want a Corvette.
That's the whole thing. Is look, I don't have a problem with people buying this, especially if you go buy this $200 power cable. Hey, whatever, man. But I just really want people to realize this has nothing to do with music at all. Nothing at all. This is consumerism. It's not music.
Yeah, it's not science either. Well, we're going down the list of things that it's not.
It's a kind of science.
Yeah, well, if you consider social science a kind of science.
Yeah. But whatever, it's look, as we said when we had Dr. Toole on, didn't we say this one with Dr. Toole? It's like the supplements business. It's no different from that.
Yeah, it's a good point. All right, buddy. Let's take a break, get some water, and come back and talk about headphone target curves and total harmonic distortion. How about that?
Yay. Back. This is Audio
Unleashed.
And we're going to talk about a very measurement-oriented article, but we're going to make it pretty simple and straightforward, as the person who wrote the article did, I think.
Yeah.
Steve Temme from Listen Inc.
Mm-hmm.
Not only is he the president of Listen Inc., which is, makes a lot of the really high-end audio analyzers. He also is a pretty prolific writer and researcher. I mean, he's on research papers with Sean Olive and people like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so he's a legit voice in the audio industry. This is an interesting piece because it kind of covers a lot of ground in a short span of space. And
it's very information dense, I think, is the way I would have put it. Yeah.
It's very readable. This is good. This reads like something Sean would have written or Floyd would have written,
Mm-hmm.
Which I got to tell you, in the world of audio technical stuff is extremely rare.
Yep.
Because a lot of it is just baffling. And
I see what you did there.
What?
Baffle.
Oh, a little, I did not mean that. Unintentional pun. How about me?
Yeah.
I'm the Shecky Green of the audio industry. He makes a lot of points in here. And he makes the point that, he says, headphone specifications rarely tell the whole story. Despite endless measurements, a lack of standards means there's little consistency in the way frequency response sensitivity and THD are measured between manufacturers, making results nearly impossible to compare. Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Because, every fixture is different. All the different head and torso simulators and stuff are different. And it's kind of a shame that they are. They give similar results, but, and every audio analyzer presents charts in like a different aspect ratio. And that kind of makes it hard to compare. It's easy to compare, like the measurements I did for a soundstage on headphones. You could compare them directly. Because I did it the same way on every headphone, unless it was some extremely weird headphone. Same with Tyler Hertzens, right?
Yeah.
Same with Audio Science, whatever it's called.
Audio Science Review?
Audio Science Review. He does his measurements the same way every time. Yeah. And for people who do that, you can compare those. Can you compare something that's done on a B&K test fixture with a Listen Inc. analyzer to something that's done on a Gross fixture with an audio precision analyzer or a Clio or whatever? Well, it's hard. However, he talks about why frequency response specs mislead. And they're hard to compare. He's right about that. Although he's saying it's rarely specified what simulator was used. In every case, certainly with the reviewers, they specify what simulator was used. In every case.
Yeah, I was about to say, that struck me as a little weird because I've never seen anybody just be like, hey, I did some measurements. I'm not going to tell you what with, but here's our measurement. No, they always detail it.
Yeah, even the low rent guys who use like the mini DSP ears thing, the $200 doohickey. He's talking about, a clearer picture would come from showing frequency responses from several measurements to demonstrate how strongly the responses shift due to ear seal leaks. Well, I did that at Soundstage. Tyler Hertzens did it. I can't remember if Audio Science Review does it. I can't remember if ratings, whatever you call it. I can't remember if they do it. They probably do. They're pretty smart. So that's not really right. And then specifications should also state whether measurements were made with ANC on or off. But they do. I mean, he's complaining about a lot of things. Maybe manufacturers don't, but I really don't think most people are looking at the manufacturer's headphone measurements.
Right.
He might have a point there that manufacturers quite often don't specify. But all the reviewers are really good about that, every single one of them. So, and he talks about, and he's correct about this too. He talks about how, the Harman target curve was originally measured on a Gross 43AG, which is what I have. That's an ear cheek simulator. And although they used a custom pinna, which they didn't at first, they added the custom pinna later, which I think was a mistake. I can see why they wanted to do it, but why not use a fixture that everybody else can buy, right?
Yeah.
And they did it. And by the time they finished theirs, Gross and B&K had come out with better, more flexible, more human-like ears. And that's what Harman was trying to do. And so I struggled with this for a long time with Harman curve, that I couldn't directly compare my measurements to theirs. And so I basically, Doug Schneider was the one who came up with this. He's like, why don't you just measure something that they say is Harman curve and use that as your reference? I'm like, okay, fine. I did. And I thought that worked really well. So there are ways to get around all of these problems. Headphone measurement people are mostly the guys, who are at the top of the field.
Yeah.
Are really responsible about this stuff. And
by the way, at the bottom of the page, he does say that. So obviously he's not talking about reviewers with the whole inconsistency thing, because at the end, literally his conclusion is, at least when review sites make objective measurements, they use consistent equipment, making results comparable, even if they don't align with manufacturer specifications. So I think he is talking about the manufacturers and their inconsistency here.
But to save that for the end is kind of like, it's negating so much of the points he's making here. Then he talks about distortion. And I gotta say, Steve Temme and Sean Olive and several others did a paper a few years ago about, how perceptible headphone distortion is. And their conclusion was, it's perceptible only if it's really bad. I think they had, if I recall correctly, they had one headphone in there that had really bad distortion. To the blind listening panel, it was clearly audible, and they didn't like it. And when I was doing measurements for Soundstage, it was almost never a problem. I'd say once a year, I got a headphone that had high distortion, and it was usually an active headphone or earphones or something like that you couldn't drive that hard, that had a crummy little amp in there or something like that. A couple of kind of wacky audiophile designs had pretty high distortion, but like most of them, especially like the planar magnetics, God, the distortion is just unmeasurable, basically, at any kind of normal listening level. And this has been my beef with people who talk about distortion all the time. And he's talking about it a lot here. It's like there's an issue with the way people measure, distortion in transducers, right? And I think that so many people get wrapped up in this idea that distortion is such an important component in the performance of a transducer. And I very strongly disagree. And I've heard, Jude Mansilla from HeadFi was telling me this years ago. He was convinced that it was, the big thing in big difference in headphones has got to be distortion. And, I don't follow his work that closely, but I used to, don't now. But I don't think that ever panned out. And, the problem with distortion is, in almost every case, you only encounter it when the thing's cranked at like loud volume, right? In which case, it's already loud.
Yeah.
So, just the loudness is going to fatigue your ears.
Yeah.
In addition to the distortion. And second
it's
of
one
all,
of those things sort of like, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead. I'm tired of talking.
I was just going to say, like, to your point, like, distortion is bad when it's really, really loud, right? Like when it's a big, big part of the signal. But I feel like so many of the things that are issues in audio are like that. And you and I always talk about, the Phantom Menace RF interference. I was recording a new episode of the Soundstage Audiophile podcast last week with Doug Schneider, Jason Thorpe, talking about their Warsaw adventures. We'll put that in the show notes for patrons at least. But when Jason came on, he was like, "Oh, hey, like I'm recording in my daughter's room. Does everything sound okay?" And I'm like, "Buddy, your Wi-Fi router is it's got to be within 3 feet of your computer. Like, I need you to either move your computer or move your Wi-Fi router. And he was like, how did you know that? I was like, I can hear it. Like, this is like, there's no mistaking the sound of that, that interference. I mean, it was just like, like, do you not hear that? And he was like, well, I don't have my headphones turned out. But that's one of those things where we so often take these real issues, right, that are real when they're significant, but we make them the sort of part of the background noise of our discussion related to these things. If distortion is a problem, you can hear the distortion and you want to fix it. If you can hear RF interference, there's just no mistaking what it is. But the silly idea that it's just, somehow disturbing the placement of it's as if the violin is standing behind the trombone. No, it's either a really bad problem or it's insignificant. So
and you're talking about, most distortion is going to be 60, 70 dB down anyway. And to where it's barely audible. And I will say I can think of one case where distortion is a giant issue, and that's in portable Bluetooth speakers, because those things, except for the very largest ones, they are always pushed to their limit. And I know because I consulted on them. And they're little tiny drivers with relatively weak amps, and you are pushing those drivers to the absolute max of what they can do. Now, you have a limiter in there that protects them, right? So you can run those things full blast, and you're almost certainly not going to damage them. But you are definitely skirting audible distortion with most of those products. And I will say also subwoofers, where the primary standard for evaluating them is CTA 2010, which is distortion versus level versus frequency, right?
Right.
So in other words, you measure a certain frequency, let's say it's 63 hertz, and you keep turning the level up until the distortion breaks a certain threshold, and that's your maximum level, right? You back it down just a notch. That's your maximum level, okay? Subwoofers, you're also pushing them to the limit. And you may be pushing, since subwoofer distortion isn't as audible because it's lower frequencies, the ear isn't as sensitive. You may be pushing 30% distortion with the subwoofer. And, CTA 2010, that's sort of roughly what the thresholds are at, is about 30%. It varies a lot, but that's a ballpark figure. And generally among the subwoofer cognoscenti, the general consensus is somewhere around 10% is audible. Not necessarily troublesome, but in every case with subwoofers, unless you've just got, maybe not like the really big SVSs or power sounds or SUs or something where you've just got so much amp power, you've got big beefy drivers, and you can get all the output you want out of them. With most subwoofers, you are pushing them up to their limit. And again, you have a limiter in there, so most subwoofers you can't blow if they're active subwoofers. But except in those couple of cases, distortion is really not, in my opinion, a significant issue. He's talking a little bit about MEMS drivers, and I think, what does that stand for? Micro electromechanical, whatever.
Yeah.
These little, they're basically printed transducers. They're sort of like integrated circuits, but they're transducers, right?
Micro electromechanical systems.
Yes.
Is what it stands for.
With those, they're so tiny. And what we're talking about here is like the microphone in your phone is a MEMS microphone, right?
Right.
They're very, very tiny. As a microphone, that's pretty great. As a speaker, and those are becoming much more common, and they're starting to make their way into earphones. They're trying to get them into headphones. I actually tested a prototype set of headphones with a MEMS tweeter, and not good. Not yet. Probably will be, but it was pretty distorted. You've got such a small amount of real estate there, and you're pushing it, and you're probably going to get some distortion issues. Same with balanced armatures, I think, to a lesser extent, because BAs have been around for 30 years. So those are a lot more refined. But I think we're going to have early MEMS equipped earphones that maybe are going to have a little bit of distortion, and that's going to be kind of an issue. But with most headphones, it's really not. And I'll also say, when I started doing it for Doug Schneider, he insisted I do power compression measurements, which is basically the way that the frequency response to the device changes when you crank it up. In other words, the bass probably will be limited, right? I was he's like, you got to do this. You got to do this. I'm like, I really should. I've never seen anybody do that. And I did it. I tried a whole bunch of headphones. I could not measure power compression in headphones.
Wow. Interesting. Yeah.
I'm sure there's somewhere you could, but I tried 4, 5, 6, nothing. I sent it all to Doug. He's like, all right, don't put that in there.
Well, now, the really scientific thing to do would have been to put it in, just to show that it doesn't matter.
But then it's just a measurement of something that doesn't matter. It's
a good point. It's a good point.
And it's just one more measurement I have to do. When I started measuring headphones, I thought I listed something like 40 measurements to do on every headphone. And I did them all. And then I'm like, okay, this doesn't matter. 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 And or maybe it matters a little bit, but it's not really worth doing the measurement. And it's not, you're trying to, whenever you're coming up with a measurement regimen, you always are comparing, you're always dealing with like, what are my time limitations? And you gotta pick a set of stuff that you think matters. And this is my second impact I want to leave on the industry is distortion is not something to freak out about, except in certain cases.
Yeah. It's not a problem until it is.
You're right. It's like, it's not, people act like it's this, kind of like RF. It's like it's, supposedly a mysterious thing that's messing up your system, but it's like, you'll hear it.
Yeah.
If it's audible, it's audible, and you will know this thing is distorting, and this is a problem, and I will back off on the volume, or I will buy better gear, or I'll buy a bigger amp, or whatever, right?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely, man.
Yeah.
All right, bud. Well, I don't think I have anything else to say about that. I didn't have a lot to say about it to begin with, but anything else you want to talk about before we wrap it up?
I will say, people should go read this, because this is... I liked reading this because it's like, okay, here's a guy who's measured a lot of headphones and knows what he's talking about.
Yeah.
So, Anyway, sorry.
Absolutely.
You were saying. What were you saying, Dennis?
I was saying, let's do some credits, buddy.
Yeah. So, who's gonna mix and master and stuff this thing?
It's your turn. You drew the short straw in this one. So.
Yeah. And I'm the first half of Butterburger Productions.
That's us.
Yeah.
You got any new music for this week, or are we going to be recycling
I'm not going to
stuff?
have any this week. I'm writing a beautiful piece right now, but I won't finish it by then.
Yeah. Cool. I might work on some new stuff this weekend.
Oh, good.
So anyway, I don't think we got anything else to say except for thanks for joining us, everybody. We appreciate each and every one of you. But patrons, stick around. We got one more for you.
Yeah, thanks, everybody. And, can I just say, we've had a couple guests on recently. We're open to suggestions about guests.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah,
except
absolutely.
Not you. Don't write us and say you should have me on as a guest.
Oh, I thought you were talking about me. I was like,
why should you be a guest? You're one of the hosts. But
I know.
But anyway, if you have a suggestion for another guest, it's not you. We're very open to that.
Absolutely. All right. Well, everybody, we'll see you in a couple of weeks. And patrons, hold tight.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Hey, thanks for sticking around to the end. If you liked what you heard and wish there'd been a little bit more of it, we got some good news for you.
Indeed, we do. If you check out patreon.com/ Audio Unleashed, all one word, you can get new episodes a little earlier than everybody else.
And sometimes it's like a day or two early. Sometimes it's nearly a week. We never really know until we start editing.
But the big plus is that you get extended cuts of every episode. And usually that's going to mean a whole extra segment that's about maybe a geekier topic or something that's a little more personal to us or something that's just going to really appeal to the hardcore Audio Unleashed listener.
Yeah, what it boils down to is if you're somebody who would support Audio Unleashed on Patreon, we're going to make sure the bonuses to every episode are really aimed straight at your interests.
Yeah, and so if you want to hear these segments, you can subscribe to our Patreon for $3 a month, which is less than I spend every single day on my cup of coffee when I go to Starbucks to write my boring articles.
Yeah. One more time with that URL, that's patreon.com/Audio Unleashed.
Or Audio
Unleashed. Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.